So we, of course, have just gone through our top stories, and now to join us for a further discussion, Amaka Anku, Africa head at the Eurasia Group, to discuss these top stories. Amaka, great to see you again. Welcome to the show. I guess we start in Nigeria with the refinery disputes, and then get to the president, Balogun. I mean, are you happy to see that they've let peace reign between the Dangote Refinery and PENGASSAN?
Look, it's a big deal because Dangote's refinery is a huge disruption to the downstream industry.
Right.
And you have existing petroleum marketers and depot owners that see him as a threat to their business. So I see the whole dispute. People are thinking about it as unions versus Dangote, but it's probably really Dafman versus Dangote,
right,
with the unions kind of thrown in the mix. Ultimately, yes, it's important that there has been a resolution. I think Dangote has to understand that there's a right to unionize.
Right.
But at the same time, you totally understand his concern about not wanting the unions to, just be able to be extorting or disrupt his business. So I think what we will see is he'll acknowledge the right to unionize. There'll be some kind of limits, maybe like a different union that he might have a little bit more control over versus that man, right? That's probably where we're going in terms of resolution.
Yeah. I mean, with how everything played out, any worries as to how foreign investors may have viewed it, or would they have just, well, this is Nigeria and they'll sort things out? Any
That's
worries?
a good question.
Yeah.
I think that if you look at the headline, it looks like noise to a foreign investor. I was just talking to some foreign investors who had been talking to the Dangote refinery, and the refinery is still planning loads of investments in Nigeria. And so that will make all the news about the refinery disputes look like noise, right? If they're still investing, they're still, focused on expanding in the Nigerian market, it will the message to investors is that's noise.
Yeah.
We will sort that out, because if we didn't think we would sort that out, we wouldn't be investing.
Gotcha. All right. Speaking of investments, I want to get your thoughts on a very big investor, Bayo Ogunlesi of the Global Infrastructure Partners, and his meeting with President Tinubu and his Lagos residents, and him talking about looking at opportunities in Nigeria. What do you make of that?
I think it's also very important, because if we think about what's been happening over the last 2 years, painful reforms, removal of subsidy, liberalization of the currency. We've been looking at the Naira has been stable for about a year now. All of that, a lot of that has come on the back of very expensive OMO issuances by the CBN, right? To basically very high interest rates on CBN securities that has attracted FPI inflows and helped shore up reserves. Of course, there's also been remittances and all the reforms that has made it easier for even people like me to just send money through, buy Naira through more formal channels rather than all the, informal stuff we used to do. But all of that is supposed to be a short-term bridge to bringing in more FDI.
Right.
And if you don't get to more FDI, I mean, you can't keep interest rates high for indefinitely. You can't keep issuing OMO bills. It's very expensive for the CBN.
Right.
So this is, for me, a very important signal that the bridge, it is working, right? That it may be the very expensive short-term securities that the CBN has been issued is bringing some dividends, right? Because you've created stability and you're attracting actual serious people with a lot of money. Now, how much do we know what, I know Bayo Ogunlesi, I don't know if GIP is going to invest, if it's his family office, but either way, my understanding is that he's never invested in Nigeria before. So for me, it's a big deal. That he's coming and he's thinking about investing. And of course, Hakeem Bello Osagie
being part of that conversation as well. Okay, you mentioned the CBN and you're mentioning the OMO and so on and so forth. What do you make of the surge in liquidity that we saw earlier in the week?
So a lot of that I was actually talking to some banks yesterday. They haven't issued OMOs since early September, several weeks now, which is longer than they had been issuing a lot more frequently. So there's a lot of liquidity in the system. I mean, I think the perception is, and I think it makes sense. Look, inflation has been going down. This is one of the few times in any country. I cover a lot of countries in Africa where people are telling you the prices are going down. Right? So it's one thing, you usually see inflation numbers coming down and people are like, I'm not feeling it. But people actually are seeing prices going down. And so if inflation has been going down, rates are still quite high. I think that I suspect that maybe there is an intention to start to bring the rates down.
Yeah.
So, a lot of liquidity in the system, holding off on issuing more bills could help to bid down the rates for the next auction.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, great.
So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. At least things are trending in the right direction.
Yeah.
All right, so that's Nigeria. Let's stay in West Africa and move over to a neighboring country, Senegal. And this discussion, looking forward to this discussion with the IMF. World Bank annual meetings will be beginning, I think, next week or so. What do you make of that dialogue with the Senegalese and the IMF?
So we think, look, Senegal is for us, it's one of the hottest frontiers in terms of, if you look at how spreads are so tight right now between treasuries and where long-dated maturities are for high-yield frontier markets, right? It's narrower than it was at the beginning of the year. We can talk about why. But Senegal is one of those that is still trading wide. And so it's gotten a lot of interest because there's more opportunity to make money, right? When you have higher spreads.
Yeah.
And I think that this is very good news because a lot of what investors have been waiting for is for the IMF to give them a program. For people who don't know, the background is that Senegal basically misreported. I don't want to use a bigger word. I thought let me not use a less appealing word, but they misreported debt data for maybe over a decade.
Wow.
Right? So they were concealing certain debts that they were taking and not reporting it. And that's a very serious offense for the IMF. So the IMF board has to review it and give them a waiver from having to repay everything that was given to them under false assurances. So we think that they will get the waiver. They have to get the waiver in order for the IMF to give them a new program, to give them another loan.
Right.
And they need a new loan in order to avoid a default.
Right.
Or to keep, to help their sustainability. So I think that's where we think this is going. They get the new program and then they get the waiver and then they start discussing a new program. Yeah. And hopefully we avoid another African, because now we had Ghana, Zambia, and Ethiopia is also
in that mix.
We can avoid another one.
It helps to get a loan from the IMF, right? But they have a new president. He's the youngest president on the continent. He's bringing in this new fresh wave of transparency and so on. How much does that play into these talks?
That's a really interesting question. I don't ask
you to predict whether they will do that, whether they will do the waiver, but it helps, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So because the IMF was in a tough situation because the debt numbers are bad, right? If 75% debt servicing to revenue, over almost 220 debt to GDP. But to your point, this was a new administration that came in and uncovered misreporting that had been happening for over 10 years, right? So it's very hard for the IMF to appear to be punishing, because they had an IMF program before, and nothing has changed fundamentally about the country, except that now that there was debt that wasn't there earlier. And so I think that's a part of why they're going to get the program from the IMF.
Okay, good. So you put a marker down. I hope they do get it. Okay, let's round off with South Africa. Amaka, I don't think AGOA is going to be renewed, but let me get your thoughts.
I agree.
They sound more optimistic over there in South Africa, saying...
I was telling my team, because yesterday, or was it on Tuesday or Wednesday, there was a flurry of newspaper articles about AGOA's expiry and maybe it could be renewed for 1 year. And I was like, why are we still talking about AGOA? Sorry. Look, I think obviously there are lots of very specific sectors for which AGOA was important and a lot of specific companies. But the reality is Trump has had across-the-board tariffs on these markets at 10 or now it's 10 or 15%. South Africa is 30%, right? For most other people, it's about 10 or 15%. Which it has effectively killed AGOA, right? Because for South Africa, a lot of the imports under AGOA was autos, which is now has a separate auto tariff. So whether they renew as well. So whether they renew AGOA or not, is almost irrelevant given that we're going to have these tariffs, right? South Africa, even if they managed to negotiate down, they're probably coming down to no less than 15%, given what has happened in Vietnam and Philippines and other places where we've seen a negotiated tariff.
Okay.
So
and just so a background for our viewers, it's the Africa Growth Opportunity Act, which allow for exports from these African nations to the U.S., right, at lower duties.
African Growth and Opportunity Act is a unilateral professional trade agreement that allows African countries to import into the U.S. at low or no tariffs.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so with the U.S. being the largest market in the world, and of course, how do you see trade just going forward? I know this is just affecting Africa, Europe, and Asia, and everybody else. Has Trump just upended the trade system as we know it, global trade?
I think so. I mean, look, so there are disadvantages and advantages.
Yeah.
A lot of countries are enacting more protectionist policy. The era of free trade is basically over.
Right.
For 30 years, we all pushed open your borders, free. That was the best thing you could do. And now we're going in the other direction, right? Like even Mexico was introducing tariffs as a fiscal and industrial policy tool. So that's the trend. Is it necessarily bad? I think, look, I'm one of those people who I believe you can have smart industrial policy, especially for developing countries like Africa where we don't have industry, where you actually have to stimulate and protect industry, right? So this actually could be geopolitically a good moment for Africa to do smart industrial policy because it's not a dirty word anymore. It used to be a dirty word, right? But if the US is doing it, then so this actually, it might be a good, when all the attention is not on you, the serious countries should buckle down and start thinking about how to actually stimulate and protect infant industry while it is fashionable to do it in the world.
Amaka Anku, Africa head at Eurasia Group. Always a pleasure having you on to share your knowledge on these issues. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.